Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Director Joshua Zeman's intense documentary Checkpoint Zoo focuses on the early days of the Russian-Ukrainian war in the city of Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine as it becomes a war zone. One side of the battlefield was in the invading Russian army, on the other side, the defending Ukrainians. And caught in between was a zoo called Feldman Ecopark, and hence the background for a remarkable story of bravery, heroism, empathy for not only human beings, but also the animals in this wonderful environment they had prior to the war. Just a very, very moving documentary film called Checkpoint Zoo. And we're joined today by the director, Joshua Zeman. Joshua, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me again.
Thank you so much for coming back. You were kind enough to come on for your previous work, The Loneliest Whale, which was just another one of those stories that you couldn't make up about this particular whale. Beautifully done. Excellent, excellent documentary. This is a very different kind of documentary in tone, and the stakes in some ways are much, much higher. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved in this particular project.
Sure, I think a lot of filmmakers want to make movies about war. You know, it's a mystery that we don't quite understand, the terrifying. We want to explore the human condition through war, myself included. I was always looking for a story, a way in that would be unique. And I knew I wanted to do something about animals. Then I read an article on the front page of the New York Times about a chimp named Chi-Chi that had escaped from a temporary zoo in Kharkiv. I had read in the article that Chi-Chi had come from another zoo that was on the outskirts of Kharkiv called Feldman Ecopark that had been terribly bombed. And what made that situation unique was that the Russians who had come over, because they were only 30 miles away, the Russian border was only 30 miles away, they had crossed over the border and set up all their armament on one side of the zoo. And the Ukrainians who came to defend their city of Kharkiv had come out and placed themselves on the other side of the zoo. And then they just started shooting at each other, missiles, lobbing bombs, etc. Anything that didn't make it to the other side fell onto this zoo. And so that was such an interesting, I had heard this, and then I saw this footage of Chi-Chi, and Chi-Chi was trying to escape to go back to Feldman Ecopark. And it was just the idea of this chimpanzee walking through the middle of Freedom Square in the middle of Kharkiv. So you had a chimpanzee looking for its freedom, while the Ukrainian people, this was just 4 months into the war, were looking for their freedom. And as a filmmaker, you kind of have to see the signs. And that was a sign. I was like, okay, I think this might be this might have a lot of interesting subtext and over issues that we can delve into. And so I called the zoo and I said, I'd like to make a documentary. They didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Ukrainian. Somebody called me back the next day and said, well, thank you. Yes, we would like to make our story. Would you like to see footage that went viral? And I said, yes, I would. And so he sent me some footage. And the first clip I saw was Timothy, one of the volunteers, driving with his cell phone in his hand, making a video of him driving a group of kangaroos. And he would say something in and they'd show the kangaroos in the back. And I was like, okay, this is unbelievable. And I said, Vadim, this is amazing. He says, would you like me to send you more viral footage? I said, yes, please. And then that's what kicked it off. And basically, over the course of 2 months, they would send me all of their footage that they had. And I would sift through it like a detective trying to figure out the story. And I had heard some things and I didn't speak any English. So I was trying to put it up on YouTube and get some rough translation or just watching what was going on. Looking for these moments. You know how there's videos you see of rescuing animals, like whales, or an animal that might have a pail on its head. And every time you pull the pail off or you disentangle the whale, you think you see that moment of the whale turning around and saying thank you, or the animal saying thank you. And it was just like moment after moment of those. And you didn't quite know if the animal was doing it, but you felt that they were. And so who doesn't love that? So I just wanted to make a movie about that unique bond.
I am so glad that you brought up that part because as we are learning more and more about our animal kingdom friends, we are understanding more and more about those kinds of connections. Whether or not, I mean, there's obviously communication barriers that we are beginning to kind of understand and overcome. Putting aside the horrors of war, these people who did this remarkable enterprise and did what they could under the most dire of circumstances. Also in the film, you see over and over a connection between humans and these animals, which gives the film a tremendous amount of emotional heft. But
Mhm.
it also continues to point out something that I truly believe is our connection. We're much more connected than we're not with animals that we find ourselves surrounded by. So it's yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. But let's talk about the circumstances, and you mentioned some of the people that we get to know in the making, in watching the Checkpoint Zoo. We have to start with the director of Oskander. Am I saying that?
Yeah, Mr. Feldman.
Mr. Feldman. Let's go with that. Let's go with that.
Alexander Feldman. Yeah, he is.
Oskander Feldman, who
Yeah,
breaks a lot of stereotypes for people that we've come to think of when we think of Ukrainians and Russians. Certainly, kind of breaks that mold for in a lot
yeah,
of
he's
different ways.
a fascinating character.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So he is a wealthy man who lives in Ukraine. For a while there, had been part of Russia, as everybody had been. But the end of communism, he ended up owning an auto repair shop, and so he ended up making a lot of money. So he had a lot of money and he collected a lot of things, weapons, art, etc. But he always had a passion for animals growing up. He always had his own little garden, and he would, with his parents, like a lot of people who have animals do. And so he wanted to do this to give back to the people of Kharkiv, his city, and but it was just such an interesting character. For me, he's like a Schindler almost,
Mm,
a guy who makes all this money, collects all these things,
hmm
but then has to turn around and give these things away to continue to feed the animals, to open up his house for the animals. And his relationship with animals brings up a lot of issues. He had a chimpanzee as part of the family. Some people think that's great, other people think that's not good. And so this was a way for us to bring up a lot of issues that tend to divide the animal community, but I think that it's actually really important to discuss around this good deed, because then it doesn't become a fight, it becomes a conversation. And I think that that's what we're missing, is conversation. And what I mean is it was interesting, the boys who rescue these animals. I'll give you another example. There's these volunteers who rescue the animals, and some of them, they worked in animal husbandry and things like that, and some of them had no connection with it. These are these four boys who came and volunteered in the middle of the film, one being Timothy, who's kind of the leader of these four boys who end up being the heroes of the film. They saw and rescued so many different animals out of these cages that their relationship with animals is an arc in the film. In the beginning, they were like, "Oh, I love this zoo. I want to rescue these animals." And by the end, they were saying, "I've rescued so many animals and I've seen so many animals terrified. Should we be putting these animals in cages?" And look, my film, is not going to change our relationship with animals. We're not going to solve the zoo issue with this film, but what we can do is show our interconnectedness with animals. And I think just ask questions. Some zoos are like, "Well, you question the point of zoos," and some people, I was like, "Yes, we're supposed to. This is an important conversation for us to have."
Yeah.
It doesn't mean zoos should never exist, and I learned a lot too about zoos and things like that, and I learned about the importance of zoos in war. But it's important to have these conversations because that allows us to find what's right and wrong in our relationship with animals. It allows us to understand that, for example, zoos that are educational versus zoos that are entertainment. And I didn't know this beforehand, or I didn't think about it. But now that I do, I was like, okay, is that zoo here for education? Great. That's a good thing. Is that zoo here just as a roadside attraction? That's not good.
You're much more versed in this field than I am, but I don't know that there's a right answer. I mean, you described the variations on a possibility of our relationship to animals. I
I don't think
just,
there's a right answer either.
yeah,
But it's important to have dialogue about
yeah, and it goes back to what I was talking about at the very beginning of our conversation. We are only now beginning to truly understand what animals are capable of, sentient beings,
it.
family
Totally.
structure. We're finding animals that are making tools
Tools. Yeah,
themselves.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
finding out these things as we go forward. And so, no, there is no right answer yet. But I understand the variations and the extremes are probably not, where we should be either. Watching people in an impossible situation make something possible happen
Mm.
in the film.
We originally looked at the film. It's an interesting idea from a filmmaking perspective. We always say, well, what's your comp? Like, how, as a filmmaker, what do you want this film to be? And as a documentarian, you don't quite know, but I was like, oh, we should do like, I wish in some ways it was like one of those 1970s Mission Impossible films, like where eagles dare, or in what Tarantino has now taken and to
Yeah.
become this Inglorious Bastards. I was like, oh, because this is a Mission Impossible. These people are going in to a zoo that's being bombed, and they're going to rescue these zoos, and we can, all these characters are almost like archetypes. You have the big boss, and you have the one woman who just swears like a sailor, where you have the really smart kid, or you have the brainiac, or you have the gentle giant. I was like, let's make that type of film. And so that was really like fun to go in and look at it like that
Yeah.
as a Mission Impossible film. And then you find the nuances. But I think that's the way, that was my first entree point, is to make a impossible mission film.
Well, you did. The way you described it is what we see, absolutely what we see in the film. These different people. Now, certainly they don't have time for, let's say, a character arc the way you would in a Mission Impossible, but we do get that sense, that flavor of these people. And again, breaking stereotypes that I think, in the West or in Europe and America, at least certainly in America, have about Russians and Ukrainians is just, it's another kind of good thing to blow up in our face here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just so much, and there's so much heart in all the people, and they're telling their story. And by the way, it kind of undersold what Feldman did, Mr. Feldman did. He blew up his life. I mean, he looked like he was wealthy. I mean, wealthy, wealthy, with the
Yeah, yeah.
wine collection and everything else. He appeared to be a man who had everything he could have ever wanted in terms of financial stability. But boy, did he turn into kind of a biblical figure in a way by the time this film is over.
Noah for sure.
Mm.
Noah for sure. It's so interesting. I really wanted to dig into that with him. I was like, what's it like to amass all this wealth and to collect all these things and then have to give them all away for animals? It must be so humbling and makes you realize what's truly important in
Yeah.
life. Is that not true charity? Because he amassed all this wine, $1 million wine collection, and he sold it for 250,000. I said, "Who did you sell it to?" He's probably said, "Oh, probably a Russian."
Yeah.
He didn't even know
Yeah.
who he sold.
Probably.
So that's the irony. The irony is giving so many things that you theoretically think that you value,
Yeah.
and giving that up for a chicken,
Yeah.
for a guinea pig, for a lion, for all these animals. In some ways, it becomes the true definition of charity, and you become a better person because you've given away all your worldly possessions for other sentient creatures.
I hope for he and his family that they are regarded in the frame that you're describing them to be seen in, because they earned it in every possible way. It's time to put some butts in the seats here, Joshua. We want to let people know that the film Checkpoint Zoo is opening here in Los Angeles at the Lemley Monica on the 21st, I want to say. I believe I'm
That's
right.
correct. On Thursday, we're going to have Q&As. We'll be screening on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This is all in Santa Monica, but we'll also be at a number of theaters on the 24th, which happens to be Ukrainian Independence Day. So please come out. We'll be in Glendale, Encino, etc. The other thing you can do, please go to www.checkpointzoo.com.
There you go.
That's our website. You can always go there and find out where we're playing. And if you are listening to this and you want to bring a screening to your community, we have direct to audience screenings that we can do with a Ukrainian church or an animal organization. My goal and my hope, more than anything, is that there are a number of animal rescue organizations that will screen this film for their members. And even we can find there's ways to do it as a fundraising tool. We can show the importance of people who save animals.
Amen.
Thus, there is no difference between a lion and a cat and a dog and a bear. I'm making weird analogies, but I see my local animal welfare people in this film, because saving sentient beings and saving animals is saving animals. It doesn't matter if you're in a war or in peace.
You're right. You're right. What a wonderful enterprise. What an emotionally gripping film this is. It will pull you into the story. You will be completely invested in this Mission Impossible situation. And you even get to know some of the animals that are in play here in terms of their own fate. Beautifully done. I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for the people who you have put this spotlight on, and hopefully all of them are doing well. I know right now this film could not be coming along at a more fraught time for the Ukrainian people, and in particular in this region of Ukraine. So there's a lot here, a lot at stake. Go out and support Checkpoint Zoo. Go to the website, as you said, checkpointzoo.com to find out more. Joshua Zeman, thank you so much for your work. And I'm going to mention again The Loneliest Whale, which was another emotionally very,
Whales.
It's a whale, for God's sake.
Come on.
They're probably
Whales,
smarter
that's all
than
you
we
have
are. Right, Joshua? They're probably even smarter than we are. So let's not.
Guaranteed. Well, probably, actually, whales, as you know, they have spindle cells. So they have the same cells that basically form emotions from cooperative events,
Yes.
cooperative things. So cooperative feeding, childcare, things like that.
Yeah.
What's so interesting about them is that they use sound and they've developed this sound over thousands of years along a evolutionary track. So think about how great we are with our eyes. Think about how great they are with their ears. And the question becomes, what happens to emotions? Like, what kind of emotions do you create when your main sense is sound versus sight? And so to me, they can hear things or they can feel things through their ears. That's so fascinating to me. They're mapping literally through sound in their brains. They are 4D mapping the oceans. And so you want to talk about smart.
and their communications can go hundreds, if not thousands of miles across the ocean. And you want to talk about one of our senses that stirs your emotion. For me, sound is that particular sense. It is.
Of course. So,
Wow.
well, thank you for all your support. It's great to be back on, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. Joshua Zeman, the film is called Checkpoint Zoo. Look for it, checkpointzoo.com. You can find out where to see this and also host a screening, because I guarantee you across the country, there are plenty of animal shelters who would love to be able to use something like this as a platform to get the word out. So I hope for the best for all of you, including yourself, Joshua. Good luck on the... You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.